All right, everybody, welcome to our first edition of LA Sessions Presents Men and Cars. And so I want to welcome our guest host, as usual, Willie Costa.
Hi, heathens.
So this, this series is a little less formal, where this was born out of just think like our mutual love of cars and of just the immersive feel, the connection that we have with cars. Like I would liken it, for example, Willie, I don't know if you agree, but like, when they say in the gym, right, you're working out, they say there's like the mind muscle connection. That's how you really get growth, right? But I feel like with men, with particularly men who like go fast objects, we have that similar kind of a feel with cars, right? That's why we test drive certain cars, we don't like them. That we test drive others, where it's like, that's the one. I don't give a shit how much it costs. I got to have it. Or
we've both been in that position before, haven't we?
Yeah. Or we've also been in the position where I don't give a shit how little it costs, because sometimes you might have an old beater, right? Everybody, I mean, you know this. I mean, you helped me work on it. I had that '74 Dodge Dart back in the day that I got for like the price of like a speaker, and I put
a
way
song
more
and a couple of
Yeah. I mean, hiring the tow truck to get it back to my place probably like cost close to how much the actual car was worth. But the real value was in putting parts in it. Time we spent, like you were helping me out. Like the time we replaced the intake manifold, and it was like,
and we found like literal mud in the runners. Like, what in the actual ass was that?
Yeah. But don't you love the thrill of it? But yeah, we all have.
We got for it was probably worth more than the engine entirely.
Oh yeah, and I mean just little things, like the joy from like, I think it took 4 of us just to remove the intake manifold because how heavy it was, and we were 4 guys in our physical primes, I might add. But then the Edelbrock replacement was like 5 pounds, all aluminum,
2-finger.
Yeah. Exactly. I think I put it in with a pair of chopsticks. It was it's just us dudes. It's hard again to really describe it to people. That's why when the average person watches racing, it doesn't matter what kind of racing. I mean, Formula One, Le Mans, NASCAR, even like drifting. If you're not into cars, it's really hard to describe it. And it's even harder to assign value to it to someone who's just like, I don't get it. I drive a car that gets me to the grocery store, home, and I sit in traffic for like 3 hours a day in it. So, like
in a lot of ways, that's kind of like any professional activity, right? It's like it's hard for some people to understand why some people are really into basketball or football. Even if they played it at high school or college level, just some people, it's just not for them.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, I think we can all kind of think of times, or at least an individual time in our lives where something resonated with us. Like, can you think back to a time in your life when you were younger and like you knew either like you had to get into cars, or there was a particular car that like just stuck with you to this day?
Oh God, so the love of my life was my mother's 1984 Volvo station wagon. No, I'm fucking with you. No, so actually it was funny. When I was a kid, we had a Torino. It did not come with Clint Eastwood, unfortunately. It was like this really disgusting, faded, like pea soup green. It looks like pea soup after you throw it back up. And that was my old man's car, to get back and forth from work for a while. And it was interesting because it was a piece of shit and everything was broken on it at all times. And, it was almost every weekend my godfather would be over if he were on that coast. I think he lived in Miami at the time. But whenever it was over, he was always helping my dad fix it. And, I was getting yelled at for not holding the light properly, or, giving my dad the wrong size wrench.
That's like a rite of passage, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why nobody in my adult life scares me. Like, what can you do to me that my dad hasn't done to me already when I gave him the wrong wrench?
For women out there who don't know, by the way, holding the flashlight for your father is a rite of passage for young boys,
Yes,
but you never win. It can never be steady
correct.
enough. Yeah, that's
It's
just
never
how it
steady
is.
enough. You're never shining on the right thing.
No.
Uh, but that thing had to get fixed constantly because, again, it was his daily driver. So if something broke and we didn't fix it, guess who didn't get to go to work? My mother actually had this tiny little super bright red Fiat Roadster stick shift, which for those out there who don't understand why guys like stick shift, there's a reason it's called manual. Uh, and that stupid little Fiat incited a lot of arguments because my mother would occasionally skip gears when she was driving it, and my dad would lose his shit and scream at her. They're like, "You're gonna break it, we're not gonna be able to afford it, whatever." In reality, I think he was just mad because when he tried to skip gears, we'd always grind him, and she never would. So
uh,
it's got a little bit of deflection
yeah.
on his part. But no, I mean those are the things I grew up with. I grew up, you had to fix it because we couldn't afford a replacement. So whether it was a car, a tool, an appliance, whatever. And honestly, ironically, that's one of the reasons why, as an adult, I don't want to fix anything, even if I know how.
Yeah.
But it's there's something about, especially that little Fiat with a tiny wheezing, little hamster wheel that it had for an engine. There's something very visceral about going for a drive, whether it's by yourself, with your parents, whatever, and you get all the senses hit. Right now, granted, the Fiat did not exactly have blistering acceleration. It did make a lot of noise, and it did emit some peculiar smells every now and then. But I think the greatest cars, the ones that stick with you, are the ones that can get you activated on all five senses, and that's not just sight, touch, sound, whatever. It's also your sense of motion, your sense of orientation in space. I'm sure we'll talk greatly about how much when we were younger we loved the feeling of lateral G forces
Yeah.
as the ultimate therapy. But no, I mean, the things like that, I think everybody, if you didn't grow up with it, I think you've been robbed. And of course, these days, everything's going toward, quieter, cleaner, more electric, absolutely dickless in terms of character. And obviously, the next generation don't get to enjoy that the way we did.
No, they don't. And we'll get into why in a second. But if I had to share something, see, growing up for me, like I never had any sort of connection with like the cars that my parents had because they had very commuter cars and like they were
Mm-hmm.
not like and I had an older brother, so I was always the guy sitting in the back seat anyway. So it wasn't until I was in high school and I was watching several Jackie Chan movies. And for people who don't know, when you watch Jackie Chan movies from the 90s, there's a reason why he only drives Mitsubishis. And it's
Yep.
because they had a deal with him. And so he was always driving that as a hero car.
Yep.
And I remember it was the movie Who Am I? And it was
Mm-hmm.
that really, really beautiful Japanese actress that was driving that white Evo. Was it at
Mm-hmm.
5? I think it was.
I think it was a 5.
Yeah, and I was like, "Holy crap, this looks so beautiful." And then after that, I watched a movie that you and I both love, his movie Thunderbolt, where
Hell
one of
yeah.
the few movies where Jackie's awesome, but we like the villain more. but um, but like he drove like that yellow Evo on that one, and again, it was just like, dude, I was like,
But that
I,
the 3000 GT
at the end, yeah,
at
yeah,
the end, yeah, the brilliant white ones.
yeah.
Uh,
It was interesting to me because up until that point, I'd always been like, I because I got immersed in the cars later than you did, I think,
mhm.
and I'd always attributed like fast cars with 2 doors, sports cars, essentially.
Yep.
And then I'd see this 4-door car that actually has utility beyond just going fast, but it was blisteringly fast, right? And then
Hmm.
of course you can't buy it in the U.S. I was like, son of a bitch, right? And but either way, I learned more about it. A lot of it through you, actually, you and my brother. who were like, you guys are like way bigger gearheads than I was, and I learned a lot from you guys. But like, and then I was like, I got to have that car. I have to have that car. Now, of course, as we know, they never made that in the U.S. However, when there were rumblings around like the early 2000s that they would be bringing the Evo, they were shopping the Evo 7 around the U.S. And so new body design, but same engine. And I was like, I got to have it. I got to have it. And it took a lot to get it because the car wasn't cheap, but I did get it in white. I got it in white. I had to part ways with my 97 Eclipse GSX, which I drove to hell and back. I almost got you killed in it before. So
some of that you should have.
Don't go driving rim of the world at 2 a.m, folks. But it was a good times. But so I got the car I wanted, and so that was like this culmination of this dream I had when I was in high school and everything, and it was great. And I just kind of thought, wow, right? Like it's that feeling you have when you're driving off the lot and you realize like, damn, I dreamt about this moment and it was totally fucking worth it. You know what I mean? And it's like, and as sad as it is to say, there have been very few times when I've had that feeling again, because something we talked about like in our previous mental health podcast was like, sometimes men, for example, we have this problem where we have a dream girl but then we don't know her. We don't know her, but we assign all of these traits that we imagine, wow, she must be as cool as she is hot. And then we're often disappointed. Right. That car never disappointed me once. You know? It was a stick shift, like you said, it was a manual. And it did everything right. And it's just one of those things, man, where I want that for all dudes. I want men who value that sort of connection, that visceral experience, to be able to get that. And I will say, it's earned. It's not given. You got to earn it. You got to work hard. You got to feel like you've actually earned the car that's in your driveway. But that's just how I felt, man. And I've never forgotten that feeling. It's like with drugs, like chasing the dragon, right? I never had that feeling again. And it's not to say I haven't like driven nice cars. I mean, look, man, I love my current car. I got a BMW 440 M Sport. Love it. And arguably
signals.
The Germans don't believe in that kind of thing. And arguably in a straight line, it's faster than the Evo by like just a hair. But but it's a luxury cruiser. It's not like this car, because that Evo had no luxury at all. Like no leather.
I remember when you took me for a drive in it, and I tried to wedge what was back then a much smaller ass into those are the Recaros, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, Jesus Christ, I don't need a fucking seatbelt. I mean, it's the whole thing is like you're literally feel like a human wedgie just on that damn seat.
And actually, a little bit of free advice for some of the young men out there, and you let me know if you agree, Willie, but like I've literally like never gotten a beautiful woman to tell me like, oh, your car is so nice once they're on the inside. On the outside, they're like, oh, it's a gorgeous car, no matter what car it is. I've gotten more compliments and second dates driving a freaking SUV than I ever did with a sporty car, because, I used to have an SUV. I mean, it's a shameful part of my life, but it was leather seats, it had entertainment system and everything like that. It wasn't sporty in the least bit, but it was really comfortable to sit in. And I learned a valuable lesson. I just realized it's like when you work out, you get more compliments from men than women.
Yes.
A lot of the bros will give you all these compliments, just like you get a Porsche, you get a Mercedes, you get a McLaren. The women are gonna say, "Oh, it's a nice car," but once you sit in it, then they're gonna be like adjusting themselves, giving you that look. Although if you could find a woman that appreciates that, hey, man, I mean, put a ring on that. I don't know.
Yeah, and if she doesn't appreciate it, be like the one meme of the old Italian retired race car driver that's taking his wife out for a spin on the track, and she's screaming to slow down. And he's like,
yeah.
Honestly, the cars I love the most, really pissed off the girlfriends I had at the time, because anywhere we'd go would always be other guys that complimented.
Yeah.
Even if it was something, arguably shitty. I had a 2003 Tiburon.
The red one.
Again, and yep, swollen labia red, 5-speed, but it was the one with the 4G63 engine, without the crank walk. And yeah, every time I go anywhere, back when it was new and relevant, guys be like, "Oh man, that's fucking nice," whatever. And of course, I'm a low self-esteem loser. I was starved for attention. I'd sit there and talk with a guy for a half hour. We'd miss our reservation, and she'd be pissed off. It's like, whatever. In-N-Out's right down the road. It's better food anyway.
It is.
But
no arguments here.
Yeah, it's all the cars that I liked. I mean, the GDB Integra, the Mazda FD, the Tiburon. Most of them. They had a couple things in common, but one of them was that they all had one characteristic that all of the dogs that I like have, which is they look like a football with a butthole. like the Tiburon was a lot of fun. It was not a beautiful car. Okay, the GDB and GC8 Integras, not beautiful cars. Like, if you're into it, you love it. It's beautiful to you.
Yeah.
The RX-7 was obviously the exception.
One of the most beautiful cars ever made.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, even if you show people that car, a picture of that car, even now, and I have confirmed this multiple times, men, women, whatever, and you show it to them with absolutely zero context whatsoever. Preferably the one where they have the modified headlight, because the old ones were pop-up, which are no longer legal, because they were so cool they were a danger to pedestrians. But if you show them a picture of that, just with the modded headlight, no spoiler, no crazy arrow, none of that stupid shit, most of them will say, "When is that coming out?"
Yes. Right.
Who makes this? It's timeless. And you tell them, it's from 1993. Yes. They're like, the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, they probably weren't even born yet. It was timeless is the right word. That car, if you did a render of it, people would think it was a concept car. It was so good looking at the time that I don't think that the modern, like, the young person can put a grasp on that. Like, whoever designed that thing, holy shit, man. Like, they deserve to go down in the annals of automotive history, because it's like they could have retired off that. You know what I mean?
They probably did.
I would hope so. I mean,
but look at the contemporaries. The Supra from that time did not age well. That Supra looked like it had a fat ass when it rolled off the lot. Okay,
it was very mid 90s.
Yes,
that was
the 300ZX with the VQ whatever V6 that had space around the engine.
I think that was a VG30 or something like that.
VG, but right? it was the one that had clearances in the engine bay that were measured in like fractions of a millimeter. Like, you couldn't get a fart inside that engine bay.
No.
Beautiful at the time, did not age well. You look at that today, you're like, oh yeah, that's 90s as hell.
So I would say you're right about that. That's why you got to give big kudos to Steve Millen and his racing team for extracting as much power from that with Go Fast parts as they did. But wow, you're right. I mean, a lot of cars from that area. Mitsubishi had the Starion?
Starion.
That looked old. Yeah. That looked old in the 90s.
Yeah, because it was old in the 90s. My neighbor growing up in SoCal, he had that black Starion stick shift. And, I mean, I'm pretty sure I almost guarantee he's dead now. Like, he was a multiple pack a day smoker when I was a teenager. And he was already getting up there in years. But I remember we talked about, like, I kind of want to move out, but I kind of don't, because when this guy passes, like, can I convince his widow to sell me the Starion? But it's timeless in its own way, but not like the RX-7.
No. That there's a reason that car still commands a very, very high premium if you try to buy it on the used market. It definitely stood the test of time, like so few cars. But it
was $30,000 or so. new, and it's about 30 grand right now. Obviously, 30,000 today is not what 30,000 was in 1993.
Right.
But no, it absolutely held its value. It's in such, even now, even after all these stupid movies, and even after the car scene, yeah, in the biggest air quotes ever, not being anything like it used to be. Even now, the following it commands and the loyalty it commands from the fans is insane.
No, for sure. And I mean, Mazda never had a good successor though. They never
No,
followed up.
so in Japan, it kept going, and I think in one of my old Best Motoring DVDs, Jesus, I'm dating myself. It talked about fifth generation and beyond RX-7s, but they were all evolutions of the FD. They didn't do Mazda did nothing terribly revolutionary, and the RX-8.
Less
Jesus
said, the
Christ.
better.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: the styling was god awful. The RX-8 is what happens when you style a car by committee and when you make design decisions by lawyers. The suicide doors were stupid. The 2+2 was there to appease the insurers. There's if you took a child, you might be able to fit them in the back like across. You couldn't fit an adult back there even if you sawed their legs off.
No.
But the driving ergonomics. I remember you and I went to drive that
Yep.
some time ago. But I love the little rotor shaped shift knob. I thought that
Yeah.
was a really cute design touch. The driving ergo was great, and the engine itself, uh, the Renesis, I think solved a hell of a lot of problems that the old 13B and in some by a lot of cases the 20B and the 26B never really got around to fixing. The Renesis was 2 liter, 250 horsepower, so 125 per liter, one of the highest power densities on the market ever, especially for a naturally aspirated car. The moving of the exhaust port from the periphery to the side uh, without having the coking problem that you had with the original 10A engine, fantastic. Like Mazda really went to town, or Ford,
Right.
at that era.
For people who don't know, that period of time, Ford was affiliated with so many companies, Jaguar, Mazda. I mean, yeah, it was ridiculous. So yeah.
Yeah, it was after, yeah, that was a period of time like Ford in the '90s had some real highlights. The SVT Cobra R proved that their engineers actually did know how to put independent suspension in a vehicle, and it also pulled 1G on the skid pad, which the M3 at the time did not.
Wow.
Nothing short of a 911 or a Ferrari at the time could pull harder on the skid pad than a Cobra, a $50,000 Ford. So there's obviously potential, and you saw hints of it, and that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of the decisions and a lot of the garbage that these companies put out during that time was so infuriating. It's like, okay, you know how to make a good rotary engine because the Renesis was pretty badass. Why did you wrap it in this bag of shit and,
Yeah.
then try to tell me that it was a good car? Like if you're gonna do that, put the Renesis in that generation Miata and call it a day.
Right.
It's like they did everything 80% correct, and the other 20% just completely shit the bed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the shifter had a really good notchy feel. Like, actually, it reminded me of like those arcade video games where it's like it clicks
Like
when
Ridge
you're.
Racer.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It had. So it's like it would be like a Michael Bay movie, shitty overall, but had really good moments, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I had like that one cool scene, that one cool song, but that doesn't alone make it a good movie. It should have just been a music video.
Yeah.
But yeah,
The
that
one
was
cool 360 rising shot of Megan Fox in Daisy Dukes. If
Yes.
Transformers had just been that for 2 hours, I think it would have won like 12 Oscars.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, yeah, there's that. I mean, yeah, sometimes it's hard to follow up a sequel. Now, an example of
Yeah.
where I think the sequel was like even better, other than like The Godfather 2, was my old Mitsubishi Eclipse. Because I have to admit, the
Yeah.
first gen Eclipse was revolutionary. Because let's be real, at that point in like the late '80s, early '90s, if you were going to get like a 200 plus horsepower all wheel drive car, it's what, an Audi, right? But
Yeah.
Audis are luxury item. I don't like them because I'm a BMW guy, but I can acknowledge the Quattro all wheel drive. That was its whole
Yes.
gimmick. But
Yeah.
now you could get an all wheel drive world beater for a fraction of that cost,
Mhm.
and it had off road capability. It just
Yep.
wasn't the best looking car, not the first generation one. It was okay. I mean, it was all right. I mean,
It got the job done, right?
it wasn't without its charm, I suppose, right? It was the
It had a
girl.
good personality.
Yeah, it was your second or third choice to go to the prom. Um, Whereas everybody, I think, would agree the second generation Eclipse, especially
Yeah.
the 97 to 99, when they
Hmm.
really cleaned up like the body arrow and all that. And it was just a work of art, man. It was really awesome. Had no ground clearance. Ask me how I know. But um, it didn't even have the best ergonomics when you were inside of it. You sat real low, really, really freaking low. And the
I
leather
remember
was.
that thing felt like you were going to scrape my ass on the street whenever we were driving around in it.
And remember, I dropped that thing like an inch and a half too.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, and it was, but boy, did that thing respond well to tuning? Let me tell you, woo. But yeah, it was it was a beautiful, beautiful car. You know, so that's the reverse RX-7 in that sense. You know,
Well, I think
although
the best thing about
actually,
your GSX was that blow-off valve.
ooh, that Apex blow off valve. You know,
I
you know
think
the.
if Apex are still in business, if not,
Uh,
they should be.
I mean, not in the U.S., but
No.
I will say this: one of the most redundant features of that blow-off valve was that little ring that lets you set the sound level. I don't know a
Yep.
single person alive that had it on anything other than the loudest setting. And woo,
Even at the quietest setting, it didn't make a difference. At the loudest setting, you would spook a herd of deer at 2 blocks, and at the quietest setting, it was like 1.8 blocks. Like it was no difference whatsoever. And every time that thing spooled up and like that, everybody turned around like, "What the fuck just happened?" It sounded
yeah.
like you blew your engine every time that thing went off. It was
If I
awesome.
if I drove that thing and those aliens from the movie A Quiet Place, if they invaded, I'd be the first guy that gets killed, man. Oh man, I'd be the first one dead right there. But those are good times. And you know what, man? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about like something that
What's up?
I think and I tell this to my nephew sometimes, because he grew up in a time where pretty much like the manufacturers, they were kind of phoning it in terms of like
Yes.
sporty cars. See,
The
I
fourth
think
generation Eclipse.
yeah, ooh, yeah.
through 2011, right? I
Hey
think that's
man,
when they.
man, that hurt my heart because I'm someone who's owned five Mitsubishis in my day,
Yep.
and they weren't all good, but half of them
Rosie
were.
Rally Lancer.
That was what everybody needs a first car. Um,
Everyone needs a first car.
Everybody needs a first car. But yeah, but like I think right, like, do you agree that the late '90s to like the about the mid 2000s was kind of like that golden era of street racing, street tuning?
Yes, for several reasons. I mean, obviously there's some context. Like for those who don't understand, who are not familiar with it, especially when it comes to the Japanese sports cars. There was a gentleman's agreement amongst the OEMs that not a freaking one of them ever honored, to where they would not make cars more powerful than 280 horsepower or 280 PS metric horsepower. Yes, there is such a thing. But you look at things like the Skyline, the last time Nissan mattered, or the Supra, or even in some cases the Imprizas and the Integras. The cars get heavier, the 0 to 60 times get quicker, but they maintain the same horsepower on paper. And it was just kind of an open joke amongst everyone from enthusiasts to tuners. Like, nobody gives a shit. Like the Nissan R34 was almost a 2-ton steel missile,
Yeah,
and if that thing was only putting out 280 PS, yeah, I'm a prima ballerina. Like there's no way in hell that fits.
that you
But
know what? Yeah, I tell people, yeah, if my Evo was the 276 horsepower was listed at, then I'm a fucking Russian sea captain, man. Hell no. And they dynoed that car. I think it was import tuner, dynoed it, and they're like,
yes,
oh wow, it's so amazing. It has 0% drivetrain loss and everything.
yeah, I think it was 276 at the wheels.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But that was a thing. But at the time, it was kind of cool because you had this entire generation of kids that had grown up with cars, older than us because they actually had money and were over 18 at the time, and that were given the opportunity to buy these relatively inexpensive, very very high performing, especially in terms of fun per buck, uh, sports cars from Japan that were still reliable. Yes, I'm still including Nissan. I can't believe I'm saying that, but Nissan, they've all to some extent fallen from grace, but Nissan especially,
Yep.
and they were just very well balanced, and they were fun, and the car scene. I mean, I still remember. I think I was a freshman in high school the first time I heard an Acura with like the big fart can. I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I do know that literally every single teenage Asian girl in the entire county is now flocking around this guy's bright yellow Acura, and they're all gorgeous. I need to learn more about this. And you just had this weird camaraderie, and it didn't matter. I mean, drifting here didn't really exist. Toge here didn't really exist, or at least we didn't call it that. It was just, let's go for a drive, and you
Yeah.
end up on Angeles Crest or Ortega or any of the other fantastic roads that we had in
That's
SoCal.
where you found us.
Hell yeah! And it was just a yes, mostly guys, and they're very patient and understanding girlfriends. That was the stereotype. It's just a bunch of dudes hanging out and appreciating, what they had, and that's the fucked up part about the good old days. You never know they're the good old days when you're in them. I mean, in the
Exactly.
early noughties, we had Super Autobox in Huntington Beach, California, and you'd be able to go there. They had all of the tuning, all the Go Fast shit for sale. Autobox in Japan was a major name at the time, so when they opened a store here, like that was, that was like the Ark of the Covenant coming down, just landing in your backyard, and you could go there, you could buy whatever you wanted, and they would install it for you right there. And they had like a customer lounge that overlooked the service bays, and they were really friendly with the customers. Like most places, don't come back here because
Right.
insurance and liability, etc. They didn't give a shit. You're like, okay, can I go back? Yeah, come on back. Like they let you sit there and watch them install your stage 2 turbo kit that you dropped $6,000 on your car while you waited. And you look at the employee lot, and all the mechanics drove modified JDM cars, and there was just this very very visceral, like very honest, for lack of a better term, appreciation for it. And then the goddamn Vin Diesel movie started getting popular.
I'll say this. The thing about like Fast and the Furious and all that, and I will say I always admired Paul Walker's contribution
Sure.
to, because I think he was one guy that was actually now granted he was saddled with some of the worst vehicle dialogue in the first movie, but
Oh yeah, I'm still looking for a Motec system exhaust.
right. But he was and two of the nitrous tanks, two of the big ones.
Yeah, the big ones. I need
Um,
NOS.
but he introduced like I think a certain legitimacy I think to racing because he I think he was a Skyline owner, right?
Yeah, yeah, he was
And,
legitimately into the scene, behind the scenes or
yeah,
offset.
but like yeah, he was part of the scene. I think he was in Super Street once, you know, with his Skyline and all that. And
Yeah,
so yeah, he was just like like a legit fanboy, but he had real skills.
yeah.
And I always wanted to give him his due because I think and then look at the cars he drove. They were very underground cars in the
Hmm.
movies, and I always thought that was pretty cool. Where Vin went for like the Hollywood cars, the ones that like the
Right, the
Charger.
Charger.
Yeah, you know,
So much torque, the chassis twisted coming off the line.
yeah, and and so I gotta give Paul Walker his due, but I also got to give the first Fast and the Furious his due. Yeah, it was basically Point Break with cars,
Yep.
but for a guy like me, for example, who again, I was never the guy that wrenched on cars the way you were. I paid people to do that, you know, and I had a debt to
You were
prove it.
above such petty juvenile things.
Which is ironic because you know both my brothers are real gearheads. They don't want people touching their cars, you know. But
Right.
I was different. You know I wanted the parts, but I wasn't the guy. But I'm open about that.
Yeah.
But like it got me into it because look, like the hero cars are the cars I owned. The Eclipse in that movie, I owned an Eclipse. The in Too Fast Too Furious and in Tokyo Drift, the hero
Hmm.
cars was what? The Evo, right? I had the Evo.
Yep.
And
I
so
thought the hero car was the RX-7 in Tokyo Drift.
you,
I remember this movie differently than you do.
well, much like the
Han
Eclipse
Solo.
much like in the first movie with the Eclipse getting blown up, the RX-7 gets
Yeah,
smashed. Ooh, that was hard to watch, huh?
a
But
little bit.
yeah, two of those beautiful cars in the series gets trashed. But yeah. So no, I mean those movies had an impact on me, and it turned the import cartooning community into $1 billion industry. Whereas before,
Yep.
it was kind of something in the shadows. You know what I
Right.
mean? And look, I'm not advocating for illegal street racing, but that movie, boy, I tell you, I mean, you know, police departments around the world had to be sharp because at night,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not saying I was a part of this or anything like that, but
Of course not.
there was a lot of effort that went to coordinating these types of things. I've heard, but
Right. Especially in a time without widespread smartphones and group chats and
exactly,
all the other crap. These damn kids don't know how lucky they have it today.
you
No, I
know,
mean, yeah, back then, Friday, Saturday nights, if you're in LA, you stayed the hell away from Glen Oaks after 10 p.m. if you didn't want to become an unwilling participant
yeah,
in a illicit competition.
yeah. No, I mean, one of our few in the future, I'm gonna try to get my buddy Franco from Seattle to be on one of our episodes.
Hell yeah.
He's verbally agreed, and I remember he was definitely something of a legend in the underground street
Yep.
racing scene back then. Would customize stuff, and yeah, so I'd
Yeah.
like to have him on. But yeah, it was a different kind of a vibe. I think that um, and I never really witnessed a lot of rivalry back then. It was more
Right.
camaraderie. Like you show up, people pop their hoods, and you see. And it wasn't like in Fast and Furious where everything's like got matching cables and all that. It ain't like that with
Yeah.
silicone hoses. No, it's
Matching
more
zip
about
ties if you're lucky.
yeah, exactly. I mean, something really. It just came down to sometimes like even if a guy just got a new catback exhaust system or something like
Hmm.
that, or even like straight pipes, that was a big deal back then because I
Yep.
mean, the reality is most of the people that drove these cars, they were just average guys who worked at like you know, just average jobs. Most of them were probably in college or some of them were in high school, to be honest. Um,
Yep.
and so they couldn't really afford most of it. They were like delivering pizzas and shit. And they
Not
couldn't
tofu.
not tofu, no. And so I mean, they were just average dudes who, whenever they got even like an intake system,
Hmm.
yeah, like a good one, not those piece of shit ones like the Iceman intakes or
Was it
APC.
Yep.
Oh,
I was
good
thinking
lord.
AEM. Like, no, not AEM. It
No,
was
you know, AM is one
APC.
of the good ones. Yeah, AM is one of the
AEM
good
was one of
ones.
the good ones. Yeah, but that
Yeah,
was also the day where, you get a cold air intake and you get a catback, and that's a free 20 horsepower
Ooh, yeah, it is.
that you didn't have to pay a whole lot of money for.
Yeah.
That's gone away.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
I
these
think
days, if you try to do that shit, I think you'll end up with 20 fewer horsepower.
the car, yeah,
So,
the car that comes to mind that represents exactly what you're saying, where I thought this was the tide was turning. It was the Honda
mhm.
S2000, where even like
Yeah,
the founder of Spoon Sports was saying like you don't have to replace every single part. And then
yeah,
I believe it was Import Tuner that did that catback exhaust system, which is what I love on
hmm
those magazines back then. Where like like they use one car, but then they install several different exhausts on it, dyno it to see what gives,
yeah,
and they get and they also, because it's California, they do the sound test to show you how many decibels it
yep.
was too. But
And it was a 92 dB cutoff.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
not that it mattered, because if the cop pulled you over for that, you get cited. You
yeah,
can fight it, but
yeah,
they're gonna cite you. They're not gonna bother actually measuring it. It wasn't a 20-degree offset.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, fuck that.
No, I'm not gonna do that. But with the S2000, yeah, I remember like a lot of the exhaust systems, like you said, like actually I were either produce negligible horsepower, or in the case of I want to say it might have been the Tanabe one, it actually was a loss. Which I like Tanabe more for their suspension tuning, but
Yeah,
I want to say the only one that gave any noticeable horsepower gains was the Veilside Teardrop, but only because it was titanium too.
yeah.
And
And
so
for those out there that don't know, titanium resonates like a motherfucker. And they didn't call that the megaphone because it was something you took to church. And
yeah,
I mean, the S2000, I liked the AP1, the first gen. Uh, I think it was probably too much of a good thing. Uh,
preach.
to be honest, I mean, for those who don't know, Google's your friend, but imagine a 2 liter, I think 240 horse engine with a 9,000 RPM red line.
Yep.
But that thing, I don't care how much VTEC you put in it, that thing did not come alive under 5,000. Like, so yeah, they built it like the OG roadsters, like the S600. Like some, I mean, I see some influence of like the MG, AG specifically in that design, but you had to beat the shit out of it to get any performance at all.
For people who are listening who don't understand, you know, RPMs, because that's pretty real. That's more, you notice that more in the stick shift. Can you explain to the layperson why coming alive after 5,000 RPMs counts in everyday driving?
It doesn't. No, so here's the thing: 90 plus percent of cars are geared for the what I call the grocery grabbing mission. Right? It's mild acceleration. You're not flogging it around corners. You're not redlining it. Every single car I've driven that I've owned, whether it's my Subarus, the Hyundai, Hondas, even my Toyota, it doesn't matter. They'll all be under 3,000 RPM on the highway. They all get more or less the same gas mileage. They have more or less the same type of driving characteristics for everyday use. Uh, so the AP1 S2000, in a lot of ways, was kind of a waste of capabilities for most people. Like, that was a car that you bought to either go to the track where you could just cut loose, and really, I'm pretty sure that car's capabilities exceeded that of the drivers
Yes.
in almost every amateur setting.
Hmm.
Uh, but the you couldn't launch it off the line unless you wanted to rev up to 6,000 plus and drop the clutch and have a nice couple $1,000 clutch job in your future. So it's like it was fantastic, but it wasn't usable. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, I thought some of the Acuras and Civics had better throttle response and better usability in everyday driving than the S2000, even though on paper and in reality and by all skeins of logic were inferior cars.
Right.
in terms of performance. So yeah, okay, 240 horsepower, you'll never see it, and
And let's be
that's
let's be real. Cars like that are an indulgence, if we're being honest.
yes,
The utility, like, could you even fit a pair of golf clubs in the?
no,
No, right?
no, no.
Like,
I know that for a fact because I took my golf clubs to the dealership. I was like, okay,
yeah,
if let me do something stupid, the masculine urge to go into debt for the next 30 years over a goddamn car. Like, let me do something stupid. Let me take my $200 set of golf clubs that I got from whatever the equivalent of Temu was back then. No, it wouldn't the bag wouldn't even fit in there with the lid open. I mean, you can put maybe 4 bags of groceries in there. Like,
yeah.
I remember I was able to put my backpack and a laptop bag, and like that was most of the trunk space. Cars like that are meant to be driven, not necessarily lived with.
No, you're not taking that to Costco. Yeah, no, no. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about how cars like the Lancer Evolution or even the Subaru Imprezas, like WRXs, STIs, which again, like you mentioned before, what an unfortunate name designation.
Well,
Um,
the tragedy is that they stopped calling STDs STDs and started calling
right.
them STIs. It's like,
Well,
God damn it.
well, don't get me started on that. I have a very strong mental health opinions about how people seem to think, oh, if you change the name of something, that alleviates any stigma. Like colored people became people of color. Oh, but now it's okay because you reverse the order. It's like, come on,
Right. And
homeless,
whoever came up with Latinx,
homeless, and
oh,
homeless, and then unhoused. But yeah,
unhoused
which is
or houseless,
ridiculous.
I think one
Which
of
is don't even get me started on that because then homeless people felt even worse because they're just like, oh, now we don't have a house, But anyway, and that's actual fact, by the way. I've heard a guy go on a rant about that in a LA County meeting once. That was funny, but no, those cars had that utility. They
yeah,
just happened to have breakneck speed to go with it. And nowadays, though, it's funny because the major manufacturers maybe they just don't see a market for it because I'm trying
right.
to think now, like they're pretty good having the cars at the high end, right? Like by high
Yes.
end, I mean like close to like above 300 horsepower. So it's going to cost you when you walk out the door. It's going to cost you well over 50 grand. So
When you
it's
go to the
like,
gas pump, it's going to cost you well over
oof,
50 grand.
oh yeah, but like,
Yeah, that's the other thing, boys and girls out there in Carland. I remember in 2002, my mother was losing her shit because 93 octane was rocketing up to $2 a gallon. So,
man, oh, if only,
and
yeah.
you rode with me in my old man's Corvette, the
Whoa.
77, with the big 350, and even it was the Californicated edition. You could actually watch the gas needle drop live.
That was the only thing. That was the damnedest thing. That car was the only one where I'm looking at your fuel gauge and I was like, dude, that's moving faster than like the minute hand
Yeah,
on a clock. I could see it going. I
yeah.
mean,
I took that thing before the first rebuild because, good lord, what an absolute nightmare that thing was to maintain. I filled her up and I took her on one of the it was I forget what on ramp it was, but it was onto the 110 because I was going up to Pasadena and full tank at the on ramp, smashed the pedal down, and by the time I got up to about 65, which was technically speeding because it was a 55 zone on this part of the highway, I'd lost a quarter tank,
for
and
people
even back then, that shit hurt.
for people who don't know, I mean, those old carbureted engines, man, they sound awesome,
Yeah,
but man, you paid a price for it.
yeah, you
And it's
did.
like, so before you romanticize like we are talking earlier about Vin Diesel having a Charger and all that, before you romanticize that, just know that if you think like some of these modern sporty cars eat up a lot of gas,
Yeah. Oh god.
man, no, those
You don't know
old
shit.
ones, they were they were unrefined, they were not modern. They weren't technological marvels or anything like that,
Right.
but I mean, they sounded great. They have a cool, very like Americanized heavy metal look to them. But
Yes.
God, geez, man, when you fill that thing up, to know that like just to drive home, you're just like you're like, dude, I'm like down like an eighth of a tank, from the
Yeah.
Arco station. Yeah, it's
Well,
crazy, man.
I mean, here's the thing. I think it was 2011 or 2012. I flew up to Camarillo Airport from Upland. I don't really know why. I needed time to keep my currency, I guess. And when so at the time, Camarillo had about 1,000 foot of displaced runway, so it was tarmac, but you couldn't land there and you couldn't use it for aircraft operations. So on this particular Saturday, they set up a cone course, and you're on final approach. Like, oh, that looks interesting. Oh shit, maybe I should pay attention to landing. But you know, land, park it immediately, like run like a bat out of hell because I got to check this out. Like, there's just an army of cars there, and they're doing a little autocross, and they're running all the old iron. And they had a '68 GTO, which is one of my favorite muscle cars of all time, with the 428. They had a couple Roadrunners with 440s. They had a 442 there. They had Shelby Cobras, like just the every possible rich old white guy muscle car that you could think of was there, and they were just beating the hell out of them on this kiln course, and calling out the times, and these things sound like hell, and they're laying down rubber, and you're like, oh my god, these are like the fastest machines ever. And they end the class, and the first car of the next class pulls up, and it's a bone stock '93 Mustang, and it sounds like a snail having an orgasm because and you're looking at it like, what the hell is this idiot doing? Like, this is a joke. This is embarrassing. And he beat the best times of the muscle cars by an easy 10 seconds.
Wow.
Like in racing, that's not even an eternity. That's a resurrection of the universe. And
Yeah.
everyone's sitting there like, what the fuck happened? And even my buddy that came with me is like, how the hell is this possible? I was like, well, this is what 30 years of engineering and development get you.
Yeah.
Like people
Mhm.
people don't appreciate a lot of the modern sports cars because I don't think they've ever experienced what the hell they evolved from.
Right. I think people romanticize
Sure.
that. And I mean, again, the Fast and the Furious movies, that's the one thing well, other than the traveling into fucking space, one of the gripes I have is they like the fact that they make you think that the old muscle cars could drift and be competitive with like the S15 Sylvias and all that. It's like,
God, no.
stop it. Even in Fantasyland, that'd be a stretch. But like, they were good, iconic cars. But yes, they don't stand the test of time. It's like, you can only go out and race with the technology that you have, right?
Yes.
That's just how it is. That's just how life goes. But is it like, is there like this masculine urge to like restore an old muscle car? Hell yes, there is.
Hell yes.
And I would say, and I would, if, for any Gen Z people out there that have just money to burn, and maybe as you're growing up, you never did anything remotely masculine, but you feel the urge now. I guess for this generation, it would the equivalent, right? Would be a car from the '90s, if you can find them.
If we can find them.
I mean,
And
like,
well, and also out here in Pennsylvania, we have to get annual inspections and
ooh,
other shenanigans on our vehicles. It's not like the good old days. Like, hey, here's my deep throated straight pipe Mustang, and here's my friend George Washington that says you'll actually test the Volkswagen GTI over there for smog. It
I
doesn't work that way anymore.
I may or may not have gotten my '97 Eclipse passed in Washington through some shenanigans, but
Yep.
on paper it passed. We were all good, OBD2 be damned. But
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Well, wait a minute. Because what's the law? Is it if a car is it 25 years older?
I think it's 25 years or more. You don't have to get smogged anymore. I obviously don't quote me on that because my cars just don't last that long anymore. I get bored with them far too quickly.
That was because I remember that was the whole reason I got that Dart, because
Yeah.
it was the year, yeah. But I'm just wondering, a lot of those golden era Japanese import cars might actually be exempt now, and
So,
so
okay, so that's an interesting topic, and this is the required disclaimer of none of this is legal advice,
correct.
and if you do things based on our opinions, you're an idiot. Uh, so there there are some very interesting what they're called gray market shenanigans that you can do. So things like the Porsche 959 that were never sold in the U.S., the old R32, 33, and 34 Skylines
Mhm.
never sold in the U.S. There are certain companies in certain places, such as Southern California, that are able to import them, but there's some trickery involved, and it's only gotten more complex over time. And it's things like mileage caps. You have to have your odometer basically audited, and I think back in the day it was like 3,500 miles a year or
Yeah,
something was the
I
cap.
think
Like you
so.
could import it under certain clues of the law with regard to antique vehicles and classic rods and whatever, but that was only part of it. You also had to insure the damn thing, which is where things really got interesting. And you still see that today a lot with the supercar loophole. If you ever see like really expensive cars, especially in areas like the Northeast or Beverly Hills or parts of Seattle where there's a lot of money, you'll see a lot of these very expensive cars that are wearing plates from uh, a specific northern mountain state next to Idaho, uh, because it's about like tax optimization. But yeah, so there's ways to do it if you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Uh, but the big hurdle isn't just importing it; it's insurance. Uh, so I mean, yeah, you can try your luck. That's my point.
I'll say this one thing that hasn't changed since the '90s and probably even before, but I can't comment on that because I wasn't alive back then. But like, was young men. I mean, actually, even people in their 30s, 40s, even where they the car is probably the worst investment they're ever going to make because it's a
Yes.
depreciating asset, but none of that matters. We put all
Yeah.
this money into it, and just to make it, just so that we can modify it, run it, and just to get just to shave off 1 second at a time in the quarter mile.
Correct.
Because for people who don't understand, it was such a big freaking deal
Yeah.
in the golden era where like 'cause my brother used to tell me the first second you shave off a quarter mile is the easiest. You could do it with like you mentioned earlier, with about $400,
Yep.
the intake that's gonna give you. I mean, if you get the right intake off a turbocharged car, that alone will give you 20 horses, and then you do like a straight exhaust, that's going to be another 20, 25 right there.
Yep.
So the first second off your quarter mile time is the easiest. Then it gets exponentially more difficult, but
And more expensive.
and more expensive because
Well, yeah.
now you're talking about changing the very core design of why it was designed. Because again, you talked about like the S2000, but that's kind of a purpose driven club car. I'm talking about
Correct.
like when you get like a Honda Civic or
Right.
a Toyota Celica, maybe, for example, where like it was tuned to do what it was supposed to do, especially the Civics, where yeah, you take it to go get groceries, or you take grandma, grandfather to the Indian casino, so
The
they can blow
Civic is the
the Social
Japanese
Security money.
entry salaryman car.
Yeah,
That's what it's built for.
yeah, but it had its DNA in automotive racing. It's just you had to tap into that. It's like the old Sentras with the what's it, the SR20s, right? The detuned
Oh yeah,
SR20s,
yeah.
non-turbo.
Yep.
They had that potential unlocked, but you had to do a little bit of trickery, a little customization. Then you can make it a world beater. But
Right.
that's why there was notorious videos of like Civics running with like higher end sports cars and all that, right? Back in the
Yeah.
day. Um,
Yeah.
and then you do all that, and you still got time to go pick up the kids from school. Um,
I don't know where the hell you're gonna put them. Now you got an 8-point roll cage in the back. You had to rip out the back seat.
yeah, it's
And no,
true.
your brother's
Ooh,
right. A
yeah,
lot of this, it's decreasing returns, and you have to. Some of this is just basic physics, right? If you are driving a vehicle for speed, aerodynamics becomes an issue.
yeah,
Well, drag goes as the square of the velocity, so twice the speed, 4 times the drag. So you very quickly start losing on the power curve, and you start getting. It's like, okay, well, I want to run more boost. Well, my car came off the line naturally aspirated, so you got to take down the compression. You have to beef up the internals. That's one of the reasons why the 2JZ, no shit, and was it the RB26
yeah.
and the old Skylines were so legendary because they were grossly overbuilt. And this goes back to what we were saying before. The OEMs are not stupid.
Yes,
Okay, the Skylines running 900 horsepower on a stock block, that doesn't happen if the engineers that designed it didn't know what you were going to do.
yeah.
The 2JZs, I've seen 2JZs that are pushing 800 or were pushing 800 on stock bottom ends. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that for a fact because I helped build the damn thing. So we didn't change any pistons. We didn't rebalance anything. We didn't blueprint anything. Yeah, so it's like when you talk about DNA, like you don't have that anymore because now everyone is driven by emissions, and OEMs are shaving weight, any way they can. So it's like you're not getting away with that anymore. But yeah, even back then, you very quickly run into a wall where it's like, okay, I've had nibbles of a few $100 at a time, or maybe a couple thousand for like a big turbo kit upgrade. But shit, now what? Now the next upgrade, that's gonna be almost 10 grand, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just an ECU reflash and a bigger turbo. Like, no, now you have to rip the engine apart. And if you're gonna rip it apart, you better blueprint the parts are going in it. You better cryoforge it. You better shot peen it. You better do all this shit to make sure it stays together.
Yep.
Because when you're pushing that much air and a corresponding amount of fuel, that thing goes from engine to bomb real quick.
Yeah.
That's what people don't tell you.
Yeah, that what you're describing with like, for example, like Toyota and Nissan engineers back then would be the equivalent of like, let's say you're you hire someone to build you like like a little like a steak knife, and then you're like, here's my budget. They're like, I got you, fam. And they fucking give you like a Hanzo Hattori katana blade. It's like it's battle ready.
I have big rats to kill.
Right? Like they gave you like the Jade Destiny from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, fucking King Arthur's Excalibur, right? And you're just like, damn, I just need to cut a porterhouse, right? That would be the equivalent. But like to what you're saying though, the thing I can kind of relate to is okay. I think we can both agree like Mitsubishi's finest accomplishment was probably the 4G63,
Yep.
especially in WRC form, in World Rally Championship form.
Mm-hmm.
They made that thing so freaking strong that like the British, like what was it, the FQ something version was like so freaking fast,
Yeah.
but off of minimal replacement parts. A lot of it was just
Yes.
new turbo, right? Which nothing wrong with the old turbo, it was just fine. It's just that they were adding these bolt-on parts that were making it go ridiculously fast. But then what went away? When they did away with that engine and they made the Evo 10s, which I hated. I hated it. It's like that
What the
freaking
hell did they put into that
that
shit
fucking
box?
that Battlestar Galactica looking piece of shit. They made a so the only good thing I can say about it was they made the block was in aluminum, right? Or the head
Right.
was aluminum, but
Well,
it,
the heads were always aluminium, and the Evos
yeah,
back
yeah,
to the
that's right.
Fords, I think.
But the problem was it's like they tuned it to my from what I remember to run just as much power as it was getting. Now I think actually was about 280 horsepower because it was not
Okay.
faster than its predecessors. And it definitely didn't rally. You couldn't rally that thing and win. And so if you try to tune that car the same way you did with the nines and under,
Yeah.
it would be like pulling the pin off a grenade. Uh, it just wasn't the business, man. But I think
Yeah.
unfortunately, more to what you're saying, yeah, that extra 1 second off of your quarter mile speed now, yeah, it was even harder to get because you had to replace a
Yeah.
lot of parts, and that's just where the industry is at now. I think, you
Yeah.
know, the
It's a lot of this is getting to the point where, well, it has been to the point. It's this is not a new development. It's to the point where the manufacturers are looking to shave ounces and cut pennies, right? Because when you're making 10 million units, saving half a cent on one of them, suddenly that becomes real money. And the problem with this is, you talked before about OEMs not being able to capture to have any character to capture a specific buyer. You see a lot of the homogenization of design. You sent me the Chip Fuse video of the current or most previous gen
yeah, Z car,
Nissan Z. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't even know if they still make it. That's how little I care about Nissan these days. And just like the stylistic choices that could have made it not great, but at least tolerable. And you have the part sharing is required now. But even if you look at the small designs, like look at any car made since 2014, I'd say from 2014 to like 2020.
yeah,
And I don't want to say this because it's gonna ruin everyone's life that hears it and actually sees what I'm looking at. Why did so many cars for almost a decade? Because I think you still see them now. Why did everyone start having that flat wheel arch? Uh, right, so you have the front quarter panel, and then there's like that bend, and then like that's it. Like
yeah,
there's no more flaring. You know that that actually exists because that strengthens that panel because you have an out of plane bend. So now when you try to distort it, it changes how that panel is going to react to load, and that makes it a little bit lighter, just like because you can
yeah,
make it thinner, and it just spread like herpes, like literally overnight. Everyone had these fucking flat arches on their wheels, and it's things like that, like it's almost like the OEMs have become a Me Too. Uh, not that kind of Me Too. Not that kind of Me Too. Let me choose a different phrase. The attitude of we can do that too, because it's a slight cost advantage.
yeah,
And what happens? Well, all these cars start taking the same design cues from each other. Like honestly, that's why I loved and hated when the first Benz G classes came out, the big black and silver ice cubes, because they were such a middle finger to
yeah.
everything else that was available. And that's one of the reasons why I like the current gen Tacomas, because like they're like comic book muscle, but they're a complete slap in the face to how a lot of trucks have been designed. So it's kind of weird. Like you have these counterculture type movements coming from the OEM, but it makes you wonder, why can't they just build something decent to begin with?
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, in our lifetime, we start to see that sort of shift from like the accountants making the design decisions around what would you say like I'm trying to think like maybe I'm wrong on this, but like maybe around like the 2007s and up because like I noticed that's when like was it like GM and all that sort of acquire like or maybe Chrysler, I think it was Chrysler, where these parts
Yeah.
bin cars were being made.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so, like, you would have a car where things would look very familiar. Because, like, in modern times, the best example, or actually the most egregious example that's gotten all the hate was Maserati, where like the
Oh god.
infotainment system was right out of a Jeep. Which
Yeah.
I'll say this:
They're
I
about as reliable, so I think that's a good design choice.
I'll say this. Listen, everybody's got their individual tastes and everything like that, but I absolutely hate American cars infotainment systems. I hate it. I
Yes.
don't care how I feel like the graphics are from like a night are from like my mom's old 486 computer. They don't look good. There's nothing intuitive about them. I think the Japanese do it well. The Germans aren't bad. You just got to get used to it. But once you get used to
Yeah.
it, you're like, where was I without it, right? But
Right.
yeah, the American ones, I just hate it. So then that's why like you spend like 80 grand on a freaking Maserati Ghibli or whatever it is that it costs, and everything down to like the freaking like the inside of your door, the
Yeah.
infotainment system, the freaking I remember the thing that was really egregious. I think it was a turn signal where ergonomically it didn't fit with the steering wheel. It was something I saw in a review where they're just like,
Really?
it was like, this is like not. It's like you have to do it takes extra effort, and you're just like, this doesn't feel right. And it turns out it was from one of their smaller cars in the
Oh my
family
god.
lineup. It was so freaking bad, and then the transmission was one of the weak links, so it has all that power, but it can't put it to the
Right.
ground because the transmission was not a sporty one. And so it's just little things like that, and then you find out, yeah, they're just whoring the name Maserati out because Maserati used to be associated with Ferrari, right? And
Right.
then now they're trying to bank on that, but it was like his parts bin car from all of Chrysler's like recycled models. And
Yeah.
so like this when like it was a GM had Saturn, they did that with like, was it the Pontiac Solstice, the
And the
Saturn
Saturn Sky.
Sky,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
and so don't get me wrong, financially it makes sense. However, I think okay, if you have like a like an entry level car, and then you find out that, oh, it's got the same common parts as like the bigger midsize sedan, you're like, yeah, whatever, who cares? But if you're getting like a high end version, like, can you imagine if you found out an RX-7 had the same interior layout as like a Mazda, like a 323 back in the days? Are you kidding me right now?
I would have been in jail.
We wouldn't be talking about that car. Weren't we just saying about how that car was so timeless? Because
Yeah.
nothing in that car even shared fucking DNA with the rest of Mazda's lineup. It was the illegitimate child of that whole family, where nothing correlated. Like a 323 and a 626, you're like, yeah, I could kind of see it's like a big brother, little brother thing. The Mazda RX-7 was in a league of its own, right?
Yes.
And I think that was the beauty of it, because you dropped like 35,000 in the freaking early 90s on that car, you were like, that better not have anything in common. Like no common parts, right? I don't even want the ashtray, because cars had ashtrays back then. You know what I mean? I don't even want any of that. I don't even want the freaking valve stem covers, on the tires the same. And so, but nowadays I get it, especially with, what is it, Stellantis? Is that the name of the company that owns Jeep, Chrysler?
Yes, I believe so. Let me ask the almighty Google machine.
They're like notorious for that, and so you're not getting that individuality anymore. And I mean, and I guess in some ways, I don't know, man. Like maybe it's indicative of you and I just coming from a different time, because the truth of the matter is, not to toot my own horn, but like I don't like to blend in with the crowd, man. Like I don't like to just
good, because we don't.
No, we don't. I don't like to just have the same shit as everybody else. And whereas I think we come in a time now where the more people try to be different, the more they're just part of the flock, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like that. I don't like it. I think we come from a time where a little bit of individuality went a long way, but it was like, it was legitimate. Whereas now,
we also came from a time where people wanted to drive. Like, I know people who have, grown ass relatives that are like, oh, I don't have a license. I don't really care. I'll just take Uber. Just stare at my belly button. Like, I don't know about you, man. When I turned 13, I was like, Jesus, I only got to wait 3 more years to get my license. Like, I got my learner's permit literally the day I was eligible. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
the day I took my driver's test, I showed up at the DMV at 6 in the goddamn morning. My appointment was at 11.
Yeah.
Okay, but okay, number one, it's the California DMV. Like, it's gonna, you have to show up at 6 for an 11 o'clock appointment. But
Right.
second of all, like, there's no way in hell I wanted to wait. Like, if my appointment was at 11, I was already asking the receptionist lady at 10:45, is my examiner here yet? Like, let's go. I don't have shit to do, but I got to get this done. You know,
Yeah.
and it's just the I think it was because you didn't have any sense of freedom back before you had a car. Like, you didn't have a smartphone.
Yeah.
You didn't have a dumb phone. Your phone was in your house. If you want to go
What?
somewhere, you
You
bummed
you
a
you
ride.
you you had a car phone. First time I ever saw one of those. Was it your mom's station wagon? I
Yeah,
was like, damn this thing.
yeah, yeah. The phone was like this fucking big and weighed 30 pounds.
The last
If
time
you
I
get
saw, the last time I saw one of those, a soldier in Vietnam had it on a backpack.
yeah, if somebody tried to carjack you, just unplug that thing and beat him to death with it. But
Oh,
no, it's like you wanted to go somewhere, you had to bum a ride, or you had to go on your bicycle, you know, and it's there's obviously going to be a delicate balance between, no one's going to raise their kids the way we grew up, right? Like, okay, I'm leaving for work, get the fuck out of the house. I don't want to see you back here until it's dinner time. That
yeah.
that shit doesn't fly anymore. You'll get CPS called on you. But the car was your only symbol of freedom. And even if it was a beat down piece of shit, like the one guy, he was on the football team. God, he was 1 year ahead of me. And when I was a freshman, he was a sophomore, playing JV. He had a Cadillac that was his parents hand me down, and I think his older sibling got it first. So by the time he got it, like, it was beat to hell.
Yeah.
It was, you put four stupid teenagers in that, and the car was probably older than all of us put together. But it didn't matter. Like, he was one of the coolest guys on campus because he had freedom. Like, and if you were his friend, you got to have some of that freedom halo shine on you because he could give you a ride.
Yeah.
So it was all
Yeah.
about. I'd argue it's all about agency, and I don't want to say self-actualization, but it's like, what the hell are you going to do if you can't even transport yourself?
No, I think there's even more to it. I mean, and what you describe is like the tip of the iceberg about the autonomy, the freedom. When you're younger, you don't have it. You don't have any of that because
Right.
why do you have to go to school? The law literally says you got to go to school.
Yeah.
And then you start to experience a little bit of freedom when, like, let's say you're fortunate to have like a car where your parents help you with the payments and you got it, even if it was a beater piece of shit.
Right.
They trust you to go to work. Like, go to work, drive it, then take it back. But
Yeah.
for that moment, you're driving it. There's nobody in the seat telling you slow down or anything like that. It's just you and the machine. You're going out there, and then when you grow up, that evolves. But the feeling of freedom is the same, right? It's just that's why it's weird. I don't know if
Yes.
you feel this way, but like, I hate driving my car down the block to go to the post office, but I love driving it. Like when I used to visit you when you're out in Vegas, it didn't
Yeah.
take a whole lot for me to be like, oh, I guess I gotta jump in my car and go see Willie in Vegas, and be in my car for like
Darn.
4 hours. You know what I mean? It driving, like where you can open it up on the highway sometimes when,
Yeah.
like if you happen to have a tool that helps you know the police radar is there, you
If such a thing existed,
if such a thing
and were
exists,
legal to deploy.
it's all intuition. It's all intuition.
Yeah.
But just little things like that where I'm like, yeah, no problem, where I get to really like just let it rip sometimes.
Yeah.
But I hate even going to a drive-through or something like that, because
God, yeah.
there's no freedom in that. You're just doing basic stuff, right? And
Yeah.
that's why, like, in my therapy practice, I love being able to ask clients, most of them men. I'm not trying to say
Mhm.
women can't enjoy cars. I'm saying most of them that enjoy this kind of thing happen to be dudes, where I ask, what do you do in your life that gives you any sort of autonomy, any sort of freedom, where it's not attached to obligation, that you feel you can do in moments where maybe not when you're super stressed. I wouldn't recommend that, but like when you just need to relax. And there's like driving. driving. Now, granted, a lot of the
Yeah,
people, lot of my clients tend to be higher net worth people, so they have
sure.
very, very fast cars they can get into. But that seems to be the one thing they identify. But I strongly suspect that a lot of people who feel that way, you give them an old 93 Tercel, they'll
Huh.
still be okay. But if they're just like, but I get to do whatever I want in it,
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, they'll be happy.
yeah.
I were having a conversation the other day and I feel like sometimes, man, like, look, man, when I was a kid, I never dreamt of days where like I'd be in like a European car, like the car
Uh-huh.
I drive now is not a car I thought I'd ever drive. And I just mean that because I never thought I would be like a guy that drove exotics or anything like that. But if let's say for the sake of argument, like like freaking the world goes to hell in the next few years or whatever, um and the economy is shit, and you were to tell me, you know what, Brian, you're gonna be stuck driving the first car you ever owned, you know what, I wouldn't be that
Yeah,
mad. I mean, you were there when I had it, and I'd be happy. We went to get like the strut bar for it from Reese Miller
yeah,
Motorsports for my old Lancer OZ Rally, and that
yeah.
was a big deal to me. That was a big deal to me. I was like, damn, I could go back to that. And I always feel fortunate that I remember where I started, but
Hmm.
I wasn't sad. I wasn't sad.
No, of
You know what
course
I
not.
mean? I was like, no, this Miss car may not mean a lot to me in terms of power and speed in the years to follow, but I remember where I was and I remember how happy I was. And
And it
it's
was
like
yours.
it was mine. And I
Yep.
took road trips on that thing and it was cool. And I remember mentally that's where I was with it. And
Yeah,
it goes back to how we opened this episode about like just the emotional connection that men have with cars. And it doesn't go away. Sometimes it goes into remission because, hey, man, this. I had a dark period of time, man, when I had a Galant, a
oh
Mitsubishi
yeah.
Outlander. I mean, the only person that benefited from that Outlander I had was my dog at the time because she had when I fold those seats down, she had a lot of room to run around in the back,
Yep.
right? But it was that CVT transmission piece of crap. It
Oh
was
god, yeah.
100 all of like 145 horsepower, and even then, I think they were being generous. Um, it
They
wasn't
went
very
the
good.
opposite way of the gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, I went into remission, right? But then what happened when I started to get to a better place in my life? I
Hmm.
got a better car. I had a better just connection with it, and I like driving. It wasn't a chore anymore.
Right.
Like nobody likes to be stuck in traffic, but I tell you, boy, when that traffic clears up, I'm the first one to like blast, like break from the crowd. You know,
Yep.
so yeah, man, it's just what it is, and I hope what we're saying resonates with some people. I mean, like whether you're a young guy who's getting into your first car, and maybe it is the equivalent of like a Lancer OZ Rally or your old Tiburon, for example, right? Where like
Oh god.
those weren't speedy cars, but they were our cars. They were
Right.
cars that I remember going through it with an Angeles Crest with you in the Tiburon.
Hmm.
Would it have been the same as if you were blasting through it in an FD or something like that, an
No,
RX-7?
probably
No,
not.
no, no, of
we,
course
we
not.
wouldn't have the unnecessary third passenger either. Uh,
But
no, the shit like that is, and here's the thing, like you're an idiot when your girlfriend asks you because I've lived through this sadly several times. Like, well, what do you like doing for fun? I was like, well, I like going for a drive. Why? Like, all right, well, this ain't gonna work out. Like, sorry, you're pretty and all, but we have fundamental differences. It's like why do people go for a walk? Why is walking so therapeutic? Because it lets you shut off some of, not all, but some of your cognitive parts of the brain, and you can kind of just be on autopilot and just have this weird zenny flow state, and you don't really have to work that hard at it. And I mean, I think that's relaxing.
yeah,
It's obviously you have to have enough of your brain working to not drive off a cliff or into some idiot deer that can't get the hint to move out of the way. But it's and it's weird to me. Like I've never met well, sorry, I met two young ladies that liked it, um, but they were by far the exception. Most of them just like, oh, okay, either they don't understand it or they just tolerate it, like, oh, it's one of those guy things. But nobody ever seems to ask why.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you like? I mean, God, and especially in SoCal, like you have so many fantastic roads, like we mentioned, Rim of the World, Ortega, Angeles Crest, the west side of Mulholland, that's from the exit from the 101, Yellow Hill. I mean, Jesus, you go up north, you have the Central Mountains by Santa Barbara. I mean, even San Francisco, even when I was at Moffett Field, it was a 2.5 hour commute during civilian hours
Yeah.
from where I was living, 60 miles. But you know what? You grab a couple coworkers and you round up a few of the interns that are of age. You hit the beer garden, and all of a sudden, 9:30, 10 o'clock rolls around. It's not that jammed, and even going through like downtown San Francisco, or tromping around there, and then taking the Bay Bridge over to keep going back up to where I was living, or coming around through Fremont. Like everything's so much quieter,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so much more relaxed. And I think not enough people understand that, because not enough people grew up in an age where you didn't have that option,
Yeah.
uh, and that's unfortunate.
Trying to explain the exhilaration. See, because there's extremes. There's the exhilaration when you're going fast, but also like the zen like
Yeah,
state you're in when you're just in a relaxing drive where you feel the road. And sometimes you're not even listening to music. You're just driving. Explaining that to someone is like it's been said. Like if I got to explain the blues to you, right?
but you ain't gonna get it.
You're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get it. And
No,
and
absolutely.
unfortunately, and again, this doesn't apply like to everybody. Look, some people. It's like we opened up like I got to give it to some of these people. Like if you own your own home and you have like what's that base model Tesla? Is it the three? Uh,
I
the,
think so.
the
Yeah,
cheapest one.
yeah, the one that all
Listen,
the Uber drivers have now. Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's a
listen,
three.
listen. If you have the ability to charge it at home, or maybe your employer
Mhm.
has like a for free charger, and so you never got to pay for fuel. Um, Good on you. And you're not someone who cares about the driving experience because you don't get immersed in it. It's just transportation, right? The same way as like putting on a freaking cover sheet to a fax back in the day. Okay, it's just a tool. It just is what it is. That's fine. The
For
one
the
this
young
is
people, a fax machine is where you fed in papers and it would make a bunch of noise, and someone else's printer would spit out what you sent them.
which also back in the day,
God.
if you wanted to be a dick, you just tape three pieces of paper together on your end.
Uh-huh.
And then you run out
I
there.
may not have done that.
You run out their ink toner, but
May or may
uh,
not have done that. I cannot confirm or deny.
yeah, it was someone, a guy you knew. Yeah,
A guy. Yeah,
yeah,
a guy.
just some guy. But yeah, and so none of this applies to folks who don't get their kicks doing this. Maybe they get their kicks doing other things like Pilates or hot yoga. I don't
Or
know.
drugs. Arguably, gasoline is a drug.
I will say this. I will say this about cars. A colleague of mine once told me, and her expertise was more in, I guess, working with clients that were going through narcotics issues. She says that drugs should be fun. The second they're not fun anymore is when you stop. And I would say with cars, it's a very similar thing because cars can be addictive. When it's not fun and it's destructive, and this is me trying to be responsible for any listeners out there,
Right.
when it's not fun and it's destructive, stop. do not, don't drive it when you're drunk. Don't drive faster than you can see. And it certainly don't do these freaking like street closing things. What they call them?
Yeah. They block off the streets. A group of idiots block off the streets so another group of idiots can race.
You know what? At least back in the I don't know if the racing versus going in donuts or figure eights, because racing means there's competition. I've never met a
That's
less
true.
competitive generation than this generation. So I mean, like back in the day, you didn't close off a block; you just went really late at night to
Yeah.
isolated areas. Like I'm not like I've heard like around Boeing Field or something back in Seattle back in the day. Um,
That's an urban legend. It's fake news.
yeah, totally fake, right? But yeah, you go to isolated areas where no family in a minivan's gonna come by and possibly crash or anything like that, or no, not gonna happen. So yeah, it's just, but those days, I think they're kind of gone. But I don't know, I don't know, and maybe this is a topic for another day. But like,
Mm.
I don't even know if, let's say, the major manufacturers brought back that sort of second tier sporty car, the equivalent of an Eclipse, the equivalent of I guess like a Celica, because I know Acura brought the Integra back, but I mean,
Well, they brought back the NSX, and that doesn't deserve to wear the badge.
the NXX, the equivalent of a automotive DEI hire, wasn't it a hybrid or something?
Yeah, yeah. It went from being the stereotypical Asian man's Ferrari to whatever
The
abomination this is supposed to be.
it became the equivalent of the Disney Snow White movie that's coming out. Yeah, gave us none of what we asked for, and so it's like it gave us like the internal combustion engine. Good,
Yeah,
that part great. That's like how that Snow White movie has Gal Gadot. Give me Gal Gadot any day of the week. And then the hybrid part was the other girl that's in it.
right,
The Latinx girl playing Snow White. We didn't ask for that, right? We didn't ask for that. It's on the high. It's like with the NSX, and because again, we have a peer that had an NSX because it was like the car he really wanted as a young person,
yeah,
and he got it as a just a symbol of that he made it, but it was the traditional version, right?
right. The
Must
correct one.
must have been like just the best day ever when he got it. You know what I mean? But the new one didn't exactly light the world on fire the same way.
Yeah. Well, the new one, thank God they stopped making that garbage in
Oh, they did.
21.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And here we go. We have a quote from Acura VP and brand officer Johnny Cada in an interview with The Drive that the second gen NSX will be powered, blah, blah, blah. The first gen was gas, second gen was a hybrid. There's going to be another one, and
I
that's
think
what
I think
worries me. And that other one's probably going to be all electric.
I think what they meant to say was the first one was gas, the second one was ass. Look, I get it. The whole hybridization part is, I mean, economically, probably a good option for a lot of people. Toyota really, really, really got behind hybrid engines when peer pressure kept saying go all electric. Didn't work. It didn't
Yes.
work out so well unless you're Tesla, basically. A lot of Johnny come latelys like
Mhm.
Rivian, Lucid, and all that, and Rivian had to be saved by VW, right?
Yep.
Lucid, I don't know what the hell they're going on with
I
them.
think Amazon bought them.
Oh, did they? Last I
I think
checked,
so. But I don't know.
last I checked, I think they were trading at like $10 a share, down from what, 70 or something like that.
Oh
So
Jesus.
yeah, I hope you didn't. Hope nobody. Hope nobody invested heavily in them. But no, I mean, I get the hybrid is like it's a safe bet. It's
Yeah.
it's it's okay, but in that sense. But again, I wouldn't buy one for like if I'm thrill seeking. I'm not gonna brag. You don't brag about that. I mean, you know what? I would say it's like this too. I look at cars a lot like with watches.
Mhm.
You don't hand down like a family heirloom like a Rolex or an Omega, or you do hand that down. Rather, I'm sorry, like, and it means something. You're just like, wow,
Yeah.
the lineage, the history, the mechanics, the movement. You do not hand down like a like a modern
Fossil.
like a fossil like with a quartz movement from China, right?
Was
It's like,
Nixon? Whatever that Nixon brand was.
yeah, Nixon, that's all they are, like movement and all that. It's like, don't get me wrong, there are certain uh um hybrid quartz movements like the Seiko Mecha quartz that are perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine. Or the Bulova precision models, very, very, very good. However, those are the exceptions, not the rule. But even
Mhm.
then, in terms of value, No, you're going to be handing down, yes, the Swiss watches that are old fashioned, right? And at the end of the day, other than every 10 years you get them serviced, they'll run forever. It could be the end of the world, and as long as you're not hanging out by MRI machines, you're gonna be perfectly fine. Well, unless you have an Omega, then yeah. If you have like the new ones, yeah, those will be fine. They're anti-magnetic, but anyway, that's beside the point. But you know, you're not gonna like pass. They don't talk about like proud men and their hybrids. Like you're not gonna see like for example in the first Fast and Furious movie, Vin Diesel pulls the car cover off it, and if it's a fucking hybrid or a full electric
battery pack,
yeah, you think people are gonna be like, ooh, right? No, that's just not it. If you're just someone who's gonna need something to get you from here to there, and you couldn't give like two shits about that driving experience, none of this applies. And why the fuck are you listening to this podcast anyway? Then
I think we're trying to man them up.
You should be listening
through osmosis.
You're probably watching The View, right? So like, different strokes to rule the world, man. But like, if you're someone who like we're a product of the 80s and you really, really got into cars in the like late 90s like us, man, I hope you're watching this and you're taking a trip down memory lane with us. And I hope you shoot us some questions, share with us some of your stories, man. We'd like to hear it. We get nostalgic hearing other people's stories, man. What movie did you watch that got you into cars? What car got you into cars, right? What cars do you aspire to own one day?
So I don't want to say it because I'm going to get so much shit from people, from the quote unquote real gearheads. I actually liked the 260 Dino. and here's the thing. Or sorry, the 206, not 260. There was a used car lot by my high school. This was when it was in Cypress, California. I don't remember what the lot was. I don't think it matters. But they had one for sale. They had a Dino, and it was like a couple grand, but it was in absolutely horrible condition.
Yeah.
And this was around the time where, I was a stupid kid. I was like, Dad, let's go look for a project car. Don't ever look for a fucking project car. Like, look for a project car if you have a daily driver that's like super reliable and it's going to run for 600 million miles, like a 4Runner or something.
There you
like
go.
Yeah, yep. A project car, honestly, you're probably better off piling all the money you're going to spend on it and lighting it on fire, because at least you'll get the thermodynamic energy released to warm you up at night. Because I mean, my old man and I, we found a GTO. They had rust cancer. We had I think it was a Chevelle we were looking at that didn't even have keys. It had like a big red push button start, and like oh, this could be cool. And fucking 6-foot flame shits out the back, and but no. So this kid in high school, Andy something, I forget what the hell his name was. Like his old man got this Dino beat to shit from this used car lot by campus. And this was a time where it's like, you know how you develop cognizance and like an internal mental landscape as you get older, and like you start to realize your position in the world. And when you're young, you're an ignorant fool. You don't know shit about anything really. And it's like, but this guy, it was only years later that I realized, like, oh my God, his family was probably really wealthy. Because they bought a beat up Ferrari, and they spent like 2 years restoring this thing, and like he never talked about it, never anything. Like we all found out when he got it, and that was it. We never heard about it again. The last day of school, his senior year, my junior year, he drove that to campus. And it was yellow. It was like bright canary yellow, and it was one of those things like if you read Holy Scripture and it's like the angel is too beautiful for mortals to look at. Like it will kill you if you stare. Like that's what this car looked like, especially, you know, when you're 16. Yeah, and you see this restored Italian sports car that this guy and his dad had worked on for 2 years, and like he had this smile on his face that I can only imagine a man has when when he gets laid, when he gets married, or when he holds his first kid for the first time. Like, you know, that serene, like, yeah, like everything's right with the world kind of smile. And he wore that thing all day. And you know, I knew that was probably one of the happiest, if not the happiest day of his life to that point. Maybe since. Again, I didn't keep in touch with any of these people. I don't know. But it's things like that. It's not just the independence, but it's the sense of accomplishment. Like you managed to resurrect this rusted out shit bucket with your old man. You know, there's obviously a lot of, you know, father son dynamics at play there that you would probably know more about than me. But it's the ability to not just say like this is mine, but it's the ability to say this thing runs because I put in effort.
Yeah.
You know, probably fucked up a lot. I don't know. Maybe he was a master mechanic. Who knows? But it's like, I made this. And I think this is why a lot of guys love manual hobbies like wood. I love woodworking. I love metalworking. I like composites manufacturing. I like a lot of manual shit because you always have something tangible to show at the end of it. Like, why do you think construction workers are, you know, usually have a lot of pride in their work? You know, it's the ability to say, I made something besides a spreadsheet. You know, here's something tangible.
Well, I mean, it's a good example you provide, because cars sometimes even have a story that most people don't know. And we're talking about like Ferrari. My understanding was old man Ferrari, for example, named that the Ferrari, the Dino, back in the day, for
after
his son.
One son that he recognized as his own.
But if I'm not mistaken, the son had some health issues, and it was a very big deal for him to kind of create this car that like was, you know, a tribute to his son, like that. And so cars always, the best cars have a lot of meaning. The worst ones, there's no brand, there's no identity. Like we're talking about the parts bin cars and all that. And again, I'm going to use an example of watches, for example. There's a lineage to it. You know, I'm a big fan of Omega. They have a lineage. Most people remember because of 007, James Bond. They have their place in the pantheon of horology. Horology is the study of time, people, not the study of horrors. Although I'm sure some people would like to study that.
Hoopology.
Yeah. But cars the same way. Like we discussed in a prior podcast about, for example, with Ferrari and its place in motorsports, whether it's F1, Le Mans, right? And certain and then certain companies where it's more about lifestyle. And I'm not gonna poo-poo on that. Like, you know, certain brands are just known for being the brand for rich people, or like guys who've like made it, or like you mentioned the G-Wagon, for example. You know, it's funny, the G-Wagons, for all their uniqueness, have been known more for like being the best car for that tax write-off, where you write off. Right. That's so if you ever wonder why so many rich business people have G-Wagons, now you know why.
The magic number is 179. Ask your accountant about that.
And 6,000 is in 6,000 pounds.
Gross vehicle weight rating, not curb weight.
Correct.
Now, technically, a 4Runner, I think, meets that criteria as well. But like, come on, man! Like, give me a fucking break. Right. If you're going to do that, you're going to get the G-Wagon. Like, if you're in a position to take advantage of these things, like, you're not going to spend it on a 4Runner.
Yeah. Or if you're like my sister, then it's an X7. But yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So each car has a certain brand identity, but also a more focused identity, I would say. But that being said, there's the identity that the more important identity is the identity as you, the driver, assigned to it, because I strongly believe it becomes an extension of you. And again, even if you're just a commuter, that's fine. But if you're someone who, like you said, the example you gave about that student that just built this car and it became this
Yeah.
something that was transcendent, right? Because it got greater meaning to him and his pops. It's just little things like that, man, that mean more because you assign it that meaning. Like it's
Right.
like a car is just a car until you drive it,
Correct.
and it can mean different things to different people. One guy's like piece of shit that was like owned by 6 different people that he bought at a CarMax or something like that
That
maybe doesn't have real meaning until he gets it, because now he
was
does
me and
something
my
to
Mustang.
it.
Actually, I had a 2015 Mustang 6-speed, and it was the Ecotech, and everyone's like, "Well, it's stupid." But I was like, "You know what, dude? Fuck you. It's 300 horsepower, and I got 33 miles a gallon. Like, eat a bag of dicks. That's all I need." But no, you're absolutely right, and the reason why I love that car, aside from the fact that it was fantastic in the snow, that is sarcasm. We had a snowstorm in State College. I actually couldn't get up my street. I made it 30 feet up, and I had to slide back to my driveway because I couldn't get out. But no, that car was what was the ingenue, if you will, of a documentary called A Faster Horse, that I recommend everyone watch, especially if you're an engineer or in any technical field. And it talks about follows the chief engineer, the Chang of that generation Mustang through its development, and that's exactly one of the things that he says in the documentary. It's about the driver's identity with the car and their relationship to it and with it. And I'm not a Ford guy. I've never been a Mustang guy or whatever. But cars like that, when people get it on the
Yeah,
factory side, uh, you don't get into it and sit in it. You strap it on,
yeah,
right? And it's like, and like everything just kind of fits.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right, man. And I mean, look at again. I'm going to give you the example of my first car, and you remember like the OZ Rally. It was only 120 horsepower. However, remember the inspiration for me at the time was that driver Lachlan O'Sullivan, and he drove it in that lower class in the SCCA Pro Rally, because there
Yep.
was the Evo, but he drove the Reese Millen Racing OZ Rally in stock form. He did all the weight reduction and all that, but the way that guy drove it, are you kidding me right now? It was just insane. And again, so that thing in his hands was something entirely different, man. It
Yeah.
wasn't anything like groundbreaking. It was just he assigned an identity to it that like people were looking at the Evo, of course. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at that one because I at the time, man, this was 2002, man. I couldn't afford a fucking Evo. I couldn't even afford to look at one.
We could
And
barely
so
afford to pay attention.
exactly, man. Man, back then I was so poor, man. If somebody broke in my home and tried to rob me, I'd rob him.
Still have the soundtrack to Super Troopers with
Yeah,
the Beady Body Beady Boo on repeat, and
I,
your fucking OZ Lancer, blasting around Seattle in a front wheel drive rally car.
right. But man, it was just. But I made that my own. I remember I had all those pictures I would take. I would send you at the time whenever I
Yep.
would add anything to it, man.
But you would
And
literally send me the pictures in the mail,
yes,
which I still have, by the way,
I,
in the room of a bunch of shit I'm never going to unpack again a day in my life.
hey
I still
man,
have all those pictures.
hey, every couple months, I go on Snapfish. I get my 100 4x6s printed for free, and that's how I pay shipping. I still do that. I still send them to my mom because she still cares about those. So yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. But nah, man, we assign different things to them. And I remember like I took a picture of you with your vet back in the day.
Yeah.
I remember because you were going to an interview that you bombed because you said you're gonna. I believe you said you're gonna blow some people's heads off. Um, uh,
I would never say that
It was
out
intent.
loud.
Yeah, it was a different time, people. Um, but it was just, but it captured the moment really well, and it was a car that I remember. Like I said, man, we sometimes the memories attached to the car become
Yep.
even more important. But like you know, I remember just driving with you in that thing when you picked me up once in Montclair, drove it to Huntington Beach, and then like we had to fill for gas twice. But
Yep.
like
On the way there.
on the way there, but
And
it
for
was like
those of you listening, that's about 30 miles. But for real though, go on Google Maps.
yeah. But it was a nice experience, man. Just driving that thing, windows down, and just not a care in the world.
You had to have the windows down. The AC wasn't working at that time.
But that was the whole point of it, you know. It was just cruising, and I think that's a lost thing. People don't go cruising anymore. They don't do that. I wish they would.
No, they don't.
Oh, except when I got to go somewhere, then I don't want
get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm gonna blast right by you. You know.
No, I like the photo that the aforementioned unnecessary passenger took. It was like the camera. It was us sitting on something, but you had your Eclipse.
Oh yeah,
the camera was like you just saw like half of ass, and like our shirts and like the nose of your Eclipse.
I have that. That's my favorite.
One of my favorites.
That's my favorite picture of all time. It was from your work truck back in the day.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Those are the best pictures, aren't they? When you don't know you're being taken. Yeah.
Yep.
It captured the moment. Well, because I drove to visit, because I lived in Washington. I drove to visit you guys at the time in my Eclipse, and it was
19 freaking hours, right?
Yeah, something. Well, I think I drove in less than that, but
well, not through Oregon, you said, because they had the speed cameras everywhere and the low speed limit.
I did get a ticket for speeding, and the highway patrolman was very nice. And he admitted to me that if he actually gave me a ticket for my actual speed, I would be spending time in an 8x8. But yeah, but at least
guys, Oregon, at least the view would be pretty.
I remember calling you once because I was driving to Vancouver for extracurricular activities back in the day, and it was the middle of the night, and I remember I called you my brother because like my car started shaking. Because I hit about 130 some miles an hour, and I didn't know what was going on.
You hit kilometers an hour, right? Because it's Canada.
Well, yeah, I wish. Can you imagine? Right? But I didn't know what was going on, and then I learned that I hit fuel cutoff, which means I hit my top speed because it was electronically regulated.
Yep.
And then, of course, what did I do? Then I got the HKS unit for my car. And the boost controller, and back then you had to get this shit from Japan, so it took like 6 weeks to come.
You didn't pull a Fast and Furious overnight parts from Japan.
No, but and it's sad that the shop that I ordered from is no longer in business, but in Burien, Washington. But it was the fuel cut eliminator, and that HKS unit had that. And so I did the homework on that, and I was like, I never had that problem again.
Yeah, imagine that.
I took it fast enough where the needle stopped moving, you know. But I mean, just kidding. I never did. It
was on the track at Irwindale Speedway.
Yeah, exactly. I had a vivid dream that it happened one day.
It's funny that you mentioned all this shit. Like the memories attached, I think, are more the most powerful things that you can have. But, you know, for you youngins out there, nobody waxes poetic about their fucking Uber.
Yeah.
All right. So just keep that in mind. Like, you are depriving yourself. If you don't get it, that's fine. You don't have to get it. You know, I don't get golf, but you know what? Millions of people are insane about it. So good for them. You don't need to get it. You just need to try it.
Yeah.
You know, and if it clicks, you're welcome. If not, well, don't talk to me.
And listen, I will just, and I'll just close by saying this, because I think it's really important that people, especially in this day and age where you get what I consider to be like synthetic experiences, have something you're passionate about. Like Willie was saying, whether it's playing golf, whether it's driving, whether it's anything like combat sports, maybe, for example, working out, hell, hiking, photography. Man, get into something where you get that immersive experience. The way that Will and I have been describing these experiences, and I hope the passion comes through because, man, I remember it was the quickest conversation ever when I asked Willie, "You want to be part of this podcast where we just fucking talk about cars and the emotion it brings out?" It was the fastest yes ever, right?
I'm kind of offended you felt the need to ask. I thought it was just assumed. Like, we're
Yeah,
supposed to be pros, you fucking dickhead.
but I hope people have something in their life that they can be just as passionate about, that they can do responsibly. Let's just be fair. That it's not going to drive them broke, and it's not going to cause them harm. Cars have to be fun. Activities have to be fun. When it's detrimental, not great. Whatever it is, and if it happens to be cars, I hope you guys tune into us and continue to support this podcast, and hopefully it invokes some kind of feeling in you, maybe like when you were into like a certain hobby, and hopefully it encourages you to get back into it now, except you'll get into it in a different way. Like I've told you, Willie, like, man, I love my Beamer right now.
Yeah,
and
I hope so.
And I would only get it, and if I ever get another car, it's only going to be like I've been moving up, not down. But that being said, it doesn't diminish like what I was really into when I was younger and all that. It's just that I've joked with you before, man. Like, man, if you literally just went back to 1999 or whatever year it was when I had my Eclipse, and you just transported it to modern times and I had it now, I would look so fucking foolish walking out of that thing. Like I'm driving to work, I'm getting out in my suit or something like that, and I'm in that thing. It just wouldn't suit me now, but it suited me as a 20-something-year-old way, way better back in the day, right? And it made me feel alive, and it's just, I feel that same way now, but in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. Where like we're not the same. Our tastes have changed, but the feeling we get is the same. It's just in a different. The rollout is different, I guess is the best way to say it, right? Like, I mean, there are lots of cars I would like to I'd like to still own one day. Well, I used to want a Jaguar F-Type, but that's a story for another time.
Oh God.
I'm not so sure that'd be a good idea anymore. But that's when we can talk to. Maybe the next episode, Willie, we can talk about aspirational goals and things that
absolutely.
Things that make us feel all warm and fuzzy inside, in terms of what we don't already have that we're curious about.
Yeah. No, that'd be a fantastic topic. Can't wait.
Yeah.
And neither can you, listeners.
Exactly.
But we're going to make you wait, so suck it up.
So anyway, man, thank you for everyone who's listening. Willie, always good chopping it up with you about cars, man. We've been doing this, talking about cars for like 30 fucking years or whatever it is. It feels like even longer, but...
So it feels like that, yeah.
It feels that way.
I think it is about 30 years. Jesus Christ, we're fucking old.
Anyway, thanks for joining us in this very informal first edition of Men and Cars. Hopefully it'll be one of many.
It will.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night.